As I was thinking about this particular issue, I don't even think I should have to say this, but unfortunately, I do. I'm going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and about the legacy that he helped to create. I'm going to say it in the context of what we see today in both cases. And then I want you to judge. I really do want you to judge if what I'm saying is correct or if it's false. Let me know why. Don't just say it once in a sting. You're wrong. But give me a reason, a solid, concrete reason why I'm wrong. Because I can be wrong. I'm human. And saying that brings me to my subject. There have been people nowadays who have skewered Martin Luther King Jr., his alleged ties to communism or socialist governments, his purported affairs with other women, and drinking possibly, and we say, well, he wasn't that good of a person. And so we feel that because he's not that good of a person, again, purported, allegedly, reputedly, that we shouldn't even celebrate his birthday. He was just a person, a flawed person. Then again, Abraham was a flawed person. Noah was a flawed person. Moses was a flawed person. Gideon was a flawed person. David, you'd think you're getting my drift, right? Was a flawed person. Want to go to the New Testament? John the Baptist was a flawed person. Peter, the same thing. Paul was a flawed person. Yet all these people we celebrate as heroes. Among them we have liars, adulterers, cheats, people who only was thinking about themselves, selfish people, people that were two-faced. All these different things made up these people. But we celebrate them without any impunity, without any, you call it, hesitation. We just celebrate them. So I'm not here to say that Martin Luther King was a saint. I don't know if he did those things or not. Maybe he did. But we can make this even more modern. George Washington was a flawed person. Abraham Lincoln was a flawed person. JFK was a flawed person. Ronald Reagan was a flawed person. George Bush, both of the father and son were flawed people. So was Bill Clinton. So was Barack Obama. So was Bill Clinton. And yes, so was Donald Trump, or is Donald Trump. They're all flawed. Yet a certain group of people celebrate them, put them on pedestals, almost not worship them. Now, I will let you know, you don't worship any man. You don't even get close to worshiping any man. Well, the one you should even think about worshiping is Jesus, because he was both human and divine. God manifested in the flesh. But as far as what he did, what he helped to do, he was a special person in that he calculated. He thought that if you take this path, maybe there's some dangers involved, but the payoff hopefully would be great. That my people who had been kept from voting, who had been kept from being employed with the same or even greater qualifications. My people who, in certain areas of the country, were afraid of being lynched and hung on a tree, just to serve as an example. It's because they happened to do the horrible thing of looking at a white woman. Well, how many white men looked at black women? No one ever said anything about it. And no one did anything about it. Because it wasn't an offense that made that essentially brought upon the death penalty. So we think. We denigrate Martin Luther King. And we denigrate, of course, Malcolm X. And we denigrate other people. Why? Because they had the temerity, they had the audacity to go for equal rights, to live, to pursue a living. Not necessarily to be a president, not necessarily to own a corporation, but to live without having to look behind their back, without having to look over the covers and under the covers and hide from people that were masked people that wanted to burn them, kill them, splay them, shoot them, knife them, beat them to a pulp, which of course they did a lot of those things to one Emmett Till. And of course people who saw that was just flabbergasted. How could anyone do that? But it was done. Dr. Martin Luther King, he may not be of my domination. He may not believe what I believe. And that's a separate story. But in terms of what he did to enhance or to help us to get to a particular point where we don't have to guard our votes, have people looking over them or given ridiculous tests to see if we would pass enough to be able to vote. The different little things that essentially afflicted our race for years, decades, even centuries, that he helped to eradicate or helped to put into motion processes that helped to eradicate the power that enslaved the minds of black people. So yes, he should, I believe, be celebrated. Not because he was divine, and not because he was such a wonderful, wonderful person, but because even a flawed person could do great things. As the adulterer and murderer David is held up as one of the best saints of all time. Or all the songs, or most of the songs. Which leads me to the other portion. And I had to look at this 2 or 3 times to see if this was true. But our own president, current president, said, and again, you may say, well, it was taken out of context. Well, that's why we have to be careful with what we say. Let me say this true. A minister, if he says something out of character, and then he comes back with, well, you didn't really get the gist of what I was trying to say, the problem is you shouldn't have said it. You should have thought before you speak or you spoke. You think before you speak. You should have thought before you spoke. Because you can lead people the wrong way by saying things flippantly or saying things that you needed context for. Then provide the context and provide it immediately instead of depending upon the listener. And that same burden I put upon those who lead our country. So when someone says that the Civil Rights Act actually hurt white people, there was nothing that was said to corroborate that. But if he's saying that, our president, of all the nation, which includes us, which includes people south, north, east, west, includes those of Asian descent, those of black descent, those of white descent, descent, whatever happens to be. President of all the people, whoever voted for him or not, he's still your president. But for him to say something like that, to me, means that many other people feel the same way. And if that's the case, I want to be able to ask you, what rights were taken away from you? Don't talk about affirmative action. And the first thing you probably get to, affirmative action. Put unqualified people in places. No, it didn't. You still have to have a basic qualification level. Now, maybe you can argue whether a person that was placed there was more or less qualified than the other candidate. But they were qualified. And DEI was even more specific. It didn't tell you. You just put someone there who was qualified. It just said to do more searching. Increase your pool so that it doesn't become a racial thing, that you only are attracting a certain group of people. So then he talks about reverse discrimination. Well, that's been a cry from those who felt disenfranchised for quite some time. But let me tell you why this is the case when people say that. When you're used to having the whole pie, and you can just maybe give crumbs to the rest of the people. When you only get 80%, 70% of the pie now, yes, you're going to be upset. Where is my pie? What did you do with the pieces of my pie? It was supposed to be 100%. But there are other people that were hungry for that pie, who worked hard for that pie, did not get the pie. You got the pie. And you're eating it in the face of everyone who's hungry for that pie. Yeah, I know I'm giving you just an example, but that's, hopefully you can relate that. But now that you got 70% of the pie, 75% of the pie, you're upset because I did not get my whole pie. The problem was you weren't entitled to the whole pie. You just took it. So now when someone else can get a piece of the pie, you're mad. And they had as much right to that pie as you. But you were used to it being taken from others to give to yourself. And no, I'm not blaming all white people. Please, let's not make this a term of blaming everybody. No. There are so many that are kind, they're nice, they're thrifty, they're fair. Like many of us, some of us are messed up. But that doesn't typify our entire people. But those who insist, because of who they are, on getting the entire pie, that day should be over. So why are you still whining about it? That's all I got to say. God bless you, and may He keep you. I love you all, no matter who you are. But it doesn't mean that I can't get upset at some of your actions. God bless you.